The phone rang at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I thought it was Axel, my son, calling to ask for rent money like he always did. I picked up with that familiar knot in my stomach, already calculating how much I could spare this month. Instead, I heard laughter in the background and his fiancée Rachel's voice saying, "Tell her about the honeymoon." My heart stopped. "What honeymoon?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Axel said casually, like he was talking about the weather, "Oh, we got married yesterday." Just like that. No invitation, no explanation, nothing. I stood there in my kitchen, holding the phone with shaking hands, trying to process what I'd just heard. The woman who'd been paying their bills for 3 years, their rent, their groceries, their emergencies, found out about their wedding like a complete stranger. Like I didn't matter at all. But you know what? That wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what happened when I finally found the courage to say no to their next request for money. Because when I did, they didn't just get angry. They didn't just guilt trip me like usual. No, they went nuclear. They tried to destroy my entire life, take away my freedom, and steal everything I'd worked for. And if you think family would never go that far, you're about to learn just how wrong you can be. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is about to get absolutely insane, and you won't want to miss what they did next. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had family members who only called when they needed something? Because I thought I knew manipulation, but I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. My name is Nancy. After my husband died 12 years ago, Axel became my whole world. I was 59 years old, suddenly alone, and terrified of losing the only family I had left. So I did what any mother would do. I worked myself to the bone to give him the best life possible. I picked up every overtime shift at the textile factory. Double shifts, weekend shifts, holidays, it didn't matter. My back ached, my feet swelled, but I kept going because Axel needed college tuition. Then graduate school. Then help with his first apartment security deposit. Every penny I earned went straight to building his future. I remember eating ramen noodles for dinner so I could send him grocery money. I wore the same winter coat for 8 years because he needed a laptop for school. When my coworkers went out for drinks after work, I went home to calculate how much I could transfer to his account that month. But I didn't mind. He was my son, my pride and joy, and watching him succeed made every sacrifice worth it. When he met Rachel in his final year of graduate school, I was over the moon. Finally, someone to love him the way he deserved. She was beautiful, articulate, studying to be a nurse. When she smiled and called me Mom at our first dinner, I nearly cried with happiness. "Thank you so much for raising such an incredible man," she told me, squeezing my hand across the table. "You're amazing." I thought I'd found a daughter. What I didn't realize was that behind that sweet smile, Rachel was doing math. She was calculating my overtime hours, estimating my savings account, figuring out exactly how much this lonely old factory worker was worth to them. She saw dollar signs every time she looked at me, and I was too grateful for their attention to notice. It started small, like these things always do. "Mom, we're short on rent this month," Axel called me one evening, his voice stressed. "Just $500. I'll pay you back next week, I promise." Of course I said yes. What mother wouldn't help her struggling son? But next week turned into next month, and then it just became every month. The excuses were always reasonable. "Just until I get promoted, Mom. Just until Rachel finishes her certification program. Just until we get on our feet." $500 a month for rent became as regular as clockwork. But that was just the beginning. Then came the grocery emergencies. "Mom, we're really tight this week. Could you help with food?" Another 150 here, 200 there. The car needed repairs, $800. Rachel's textbooks cost more than expected, $300. Their utilities got shut off because of a mix-up, $400 to get the power back on. I started keeping a calculator by my phone because the requests came so fast I could barely keep track. Every time I thought we'd hit the bottom, there was another crisis, another emergency that only Mom could solve. 3 years of this, 3 years of $500 a month, just for rent. That's $18,000 right there. Add in all the groceries, emergencies, and one-time helps, and I'd handed over another $15,000. $33,000. from a factory worker's pension. I was eating generic cereal for breakfast and shopping at thrift stores so they could live in their nice apartment and buy organic food. I canceled my cable to help pay for their streaming services. I drove my 15-year-old car with the broken air conditioning while they talked about upgrading their phones. But here's the thing. They didn't just take my money. They made me feel grateful they were letting me give it to them. "You're the best mom ever," Rachel would gush. "We're so lucky to have you." And like a fool, I believed them. I thought I was investing in our relationship. I thought I was buying myself a place in their lives, ensuring I'd never be alone. I had no idea I was actually paying for a front row seat to my own humiliation. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being Axel's mother and became his ATM. The change was so gradual I almost didn't notice it at first. Our weekly phone calls turned into monthly check-ins, then disappeared entirely unless they needed something. When my phone rang and I saw Axel's name, my heart would race with excitement, until I realized it was always about money. "Hey Mom, how's it going? Listen, we have a situation." That's how every conversation started. No, "How are you feeling?" No, "What's new in your life?" Just straight to the crisis that required my wallet. When I'd visit their apartment, the one I was paying for, I felt like an unwelcome guest in my own investment. I'd sit on their couch, looking around at the furniture I'd helped buy, feeling completely out of place. Rachel had this way of making little comments that cut deep, but sounded innocent on the surface. "Oh, Nancy, you probably wouldn't understand this," she'd say when they talked about their plans. "It's more of a young person thing." Or, "You just can't relate to our goals right now." The worst part? Axel would just nod along, like he completely agreed with her. My own son, the boy I'd raised, would sit there silent while his wife dismissed me like I was some doddering old fool who couldn't possibly understand their sophisticated 20-something lifestyle. I tried so hard to stay connected. I'd bring them expensive groceries they mentioned liking, hoping to earn an invitation to stay for dinner. I'd ask about their friends, their jobs, their dreams, anything to feel like I mattered to them beyond my bank account. But every visit felt shorter, every conversation more superficial. I was becoming a stranger in my son's life, and the only thing keeping me relevant was the money I kept sending. If this story is hitting close to home, hit that subscribe button because it gets so much worse before it gets better. I was funding their entire existence, but somehow I was still the outsider looking in. Last spring, I started noticing things that made my stomach twist with anxiety. There were hushed conversations that stopped the moment I walked into a room. Axel and Rachel would be talking intensely at their kitchen table, but the second they heard my footsteps, sudden silence. Then bright, fake smiles and a quick, "Hey Mom, what's up?" I'd catch glimpses of wedding magazines hastily shoved under their coffee table when I'd visit. Bridal websites quickly minimized on Rachel's laptop screen. Phone calls taken in the bathroom with the door locked. When I'd ask about their wedding plans, because they'd been engaged for 8 months, they'd get strangely vague. "We're thinking something really small, Mom," Axel would say, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe next year," Rachel would add. "We're in no rush." But I could feel it. Something was happening. Something big. Something important. And I wasn't part of it. I started paying closer attention. I noticed how they'd exchange looks when I asked innocent questions about venues or guest lists. How they'd change the subject whenever I mentioned wanting to help with planning. The woman who'd been funding their life for 3 years, paying their rent, buying their groceries, covering their emergencies, apparently wasn't important enough to include in the biggest day of their lives. I'd lie awake at night, wondering what I'd done wrong. Had I been too pushy? Too involved? Was I embarrassing them somehow? I convinced myself I was being paranoid. These were good kids who loved me. They'd never planned something so huge without including me. I was Axel's mother, for God's sake. Of course I'd be part of their wedding. But deep down, in that quiet place, where we know things we don't want to admit, I knew the truth. They were planning their future, and I wasn't in it. The desperate, pathetic part of me kept sending those monthly payments anyway, hoping that somehow my financial support would buy me back into their hearts. I had no idea that while I was trying to purchase their love, they were already celebrating their new life without me. After I hung up from that call, I sat in my kitchen staring at the wall for an hour. My mind couldn't process what had just happened. My son, my baby boy, had gotten married yesterday and told me like he was mentioning the weather. The casual cruelty of it left me numb. Then I did what any normal person would do in 2023. I went to Facebook. And there it was, Rachel's post from the day before. Married my best friend yesterday. So grateful for all our special people who celebrated with us. The word special hit me like a slap across the face. I scrolled through 50 photos of their perfect ceremony. Rachel in a stunning white dress that probably cost more than I made in 2 months. Axel looking handsome in a navy suit I'd never seen before. They were glowing, radiant, surrounded by love and joy. Her entire family was there. Parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, even her elderly grandmother in a wheelchair. His college friends, their co-workers, neighbors I recognized from their apartment building. There was even their mailman, for crying out loud. Everyone they considered special. Everyone who mattered enough to witness their love. Everyone except the woman who'd been paying their bills for 3 years. I recognized face after face in those photos. People who knew me. People who'd seen me at family gatherings. Who'd eaten food I'd brought to their parties. They all knew about this wedding. They'd all kept the secret. The photographer had captured every moment. The tears during the vows, the laughter during speeches, the dancing at the reception. It looked expensive. Really expensive. Professional flowers, a fancy venue, an open bar. All while they'd been telling me they were broke and needed my rent money. I sat there at my kitchen table, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone, scrolling through their happiness while my world crumbled around me. The physical pain was overwhelming. My chest felt like someone was crushing it with their bare hands. I couldn't breathe properly. Tears streamed down my face until my eyes were swollen shut. But the emotional devastation was worse. 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of love, 3 years of believing I was helping build their future together. And I wasn't even worth a phone call to tell me they were getting married. I wasn't special enough to be there. I was just the ATM they kept around for convenience. 2 days later, they called again, not to apologize, not to explain, not to acknowledge the pain they'd caused. They needed rent money. "Hey Mom, can you send the usual 500? Axel's voice was cheerful, like absolutely nothing had happened, like he hadn't just destroyed his mother's heart 48 hours earlier. I stood in my kitchen, still wearing the same pajamas I'd been crying in since Tuesday, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Axel," I said, my voice hoarse from sobbing, "why wasn't I invited to your wedding?" There was a pause. Then I heard him talking to Rachel in the background, muffled voices I couldn't quite make out. "Mom, hold on, Rachel wants to talk to you." Rachel's voice came on the line, sweet as poison. "Hi Nancy, about the wedding, we only invited special people." She said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she was explaining why they chose chicken over fish for dinner. No guilt, no shame, no recognition of how deeply those words would cut. "We wanted to keep it intimate," she continued. "You understand, right? It was just for people who really matter to us." That's when something inside me snapped. For 3 years, I'd been bending over backwards to prove my worth to them. I'd given them everything. My money, my time, my dignity. I'd made myself smaller and smaller, hoping they'd find room for me in their lives. But in that moment, sitting in my kitchen in tear-stained pajamas, listening to my daughter-in-law casually dismiss me as unspecial, I found my backbone. "Well then," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days, "I only help special people." And I hung up. The silence in my kitchen was deafening, but for the first time in 3 years it wasn't the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of power. My phone started ringing immediately, Axel calling back, probably panicking. I let it go to voicemail, then again and again. I didn't answer. For the first time in 3 years, the ATM was officially closed. Within a week, they showed up at my door with a lawyer, a real lawyer, in an expensive suit, carrying papers that would change my life forever. I opened the door expecting maybe an apology. Instead, I found legal documents claiming I was mentally incompetent. They were filing for guardianship of me. "She's clearly having a breakdown," Axel told the social worker who came to investigate. He stood in my living room, pointing at me like I was a stranger. She's acting irrationally, refusing to help family. Rachel dabbed fake tears from her eyes. We're so worried about her mental state. She's become paranoid, hostile. We think she might be developing dementia. I sat there in shock, listening to them systematically destroy my reputation. Every word was calculated to make me sound unstable. The translation? I'd stopped giving them money, so clearly I'd lost my mind. But here's what terrified me most. They didn't just want my monthly income. They wanted everything. My pension, my savings, my social security, even my house. Their plan was to have me declared legally incompetent so they could access every penny I'd ever earned. If you think they went too far, you need to subscribe right now, because what happens next will blow your mind. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you do if your own family tried to have you declared mentally incompetent? Because I was about to find out just how dirty they were willing to fight. My own son would rather destroy me completely than get a job and pay his own rent. That's when I met Zane, the attorney who would save my life. My neighbor Martha referred me to him after watching this nightmare unfold. When I called his office, barely able to speak through my tears, he told me to come in immediately. Nancy, he said after listening to my story, what they're doing is called financial elder abuse, and it's a felony. For the first time in months, someone believed me. Zane helped me gather bank records showing 3 years of payments. We documented every transfer, every emergency, every lie they'd told to get my money. Martha and Dorothy stepped forward as witnesses to my competence. I've lived next to Nancy for 8 years. Martha told the social worker. She's one of the most mentally sharp people I know. The psychiatric evaluation they demanded? I passed with flying colors. Dr. Richardson spent 3 hours testing my memory and reasoning abilities. You're one of the most mentally sharp 71-year-olds I've ever assessed, she told me. Your decision to stop financial support was completely rational. With Zane's help, we built an ironclad case. Bank records proving exploitation. Witness testimony about my competence. Professional psychiatric evaluation confirming my mental sharpness. But most importantly, I discovered something I'd forgotten, my own strength. For 3 years I'd lost myself trying to keep them happy. Now, surrounded by people who actually cared about me, I remembered who Nancy really was. I wasn't just some lonely old woman desperate for attention. I was a survivor, a fighter, and I wasn't going down without a battle. In court, Judge Skye asked Axel one simple question that destroyed their entire case. If your mother is mentally incompetent, she said, how was she competent enough to manage her finances well enough to support you for 3 years? Axel's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Rachel suddenly found her manicure fascinating. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements showing $33,000 in transfers. Witness testimony from Martha and Dorothy. Dr. Richardson's psychiatric evaluation declaring me mentally competent. But the most damning evidence was their social media posts. Expensive wedding photos, fancy dinners, Hawaii honeymoon trips, all while claiming to be broke and needing my help. Judge Skye held up a photo from their honeymoon. You were desperate enough to need your mother's rent money, but wealthy enough for a week in Maui? They'd been caught red-handed. The evidence shows systematic financial exploitation of a mentally competent adult, Judge Skye said. Guardianship denied. Axel's face went white. Rachel started crying, real tears this time. I walked out of that courtroom with my freedom intact, my dignity restored, and my bank account finally under my own control. After 3 years of being treated like an ATM, I was finally just Nancy again. And that felt better than any amount of money I'd ever given them. 6 months later, I was sitting in my own apartment, bills paid with my own money, surrounded by friends who valued me for who I was. Martha and Dorothy came over for dinner regularly now. We played cards, watched movies, had real conversations, not desperate attempts to stay relevant in someone else's life. Axel sent letters sometimes, apologies mixed with subtle requests for money. I know we made mistakes, Mom, but we're family. Rachel's pregnant now, and we could really use help. I filed them all in the same place. The garbage. Because I'd learned something crucial. Love isn't supposed to bankrupt you. Real family doesn't only call when they need something. And family isn't supposed to try to steal your mind when they can't steal your money anymore. Some people said I was being too harsh, that I should forgive because family is family. But those people hadn't spent 3 years being bled dry by the people they loved most. Some lessons cost $33,000 to learn, but my sanity? That was priceless. If this story taught you something about setting boundaries with toxic family members, hit that subscribe button because these stories matter. Tell me in the comments, do you think I was too harsh, or was cutting them off completely the right choice? Because some bridges are worth burning to save yourself. The woman who'd once worked overtime to fund someone else's dreams was finally living her own life again, and it felt absolutely perfect.